Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Global Express. I'm Neena Gopal. This is the new Indian Express's weekly interaction with experts, where we analyze the impact of developments in our backyard, on our neighborhood, and of course on India. Do click on the new Indian Express website and tweet and follow Global Express. This week we're looking not at the political rumblings in our critical neighbor Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the implications of the return home by the last of the political patriarchs, Mian Nawaz Sharif, but at Pakistan turning into the new battleground between various terror groups that are attacking security agencies and ordinary people. The bloodbath in Mastung, a town in Balochistan, following a suicide attack on a congregation marking the Prophet's birthday, was preceded on the same day by a bomb attack in a neighboring province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Both bear the unmistakable stamp of the Islamic State Khorasan, but instead of fingers being pointed at them and more possibly the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which has denied responsibility, Pakistan Interior Minister has very conveniently raised the involvement of India. Talking to us today are two noted authors and journalists. We have Mr. Kabir Taneja, fellow and head of this West Asia initiative with the Strategic Studies program at the Observer Research Foundation. He's also the author of the ISIS Peril, the world's most feared terror group and its shadow on South Asia. Welcome, Mr. Taneja.
Thank you so much.
We also have noted journalist Imtiaz Gul. He founded the Islamabad-based Center for Research and Security Studies, which focuses on security and governance. He's fluent in Pashto and Dari and German. And he's also the author of a number of books, Most Dangerous Place, Pakistan Lawless Frontier, Unholy Nexus, Pakistan-Afghan Relations Under the Taliban. And I thought the most pertinent one today, the Al-Qaeda connection, Taliban and terror in the tribal areas. So welcome, Mr. Gul. So it was reportedly one of the bloodiest days in recent history. Pakistan's analysts are calling it the return of terror. The militants are getting more audacious. They're better armed. They're better organized. It's being called the new terror triad, Tehreek-e-Taliban, Islamic State Khorasan, and the Balochistan Liberation Army. So, Mr. Taneja, as you have in your title of your book, called it a shadow of ISIS Khorasan over South Asia. How realistic is that prospect of a shadow over us?
Yeah, thanks so much. Look, from the beginning, I think it's been very clear that Islamic State as a group, going back to 2014-15 when it started sort of forming in Iraq and Syria, that it has already been much more successful than Al-Qaeda has ever been. And I include that from a 9/11 perspective as well. I think Islamic State, even when it was forming in Afghanistan, first and foremost, we have to really sort of understand that, ISKP as it is known, or Khorasan province as it is known, is not really an extension of Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Islamic State Khorasan is a formation and it's a symptom of regional division that exists between Afghanistan and Pakistan as well. So for a long period of time, we have seen this region largely from the fault line of the LOC, right? We've seen it from largely fault line of Kashmir.
Correct.
But there have been two fault lines. The Durand line is something we haven't really discussed much about because previously, as part of the Republic, whether it's Ashraf Ghani or his predecessor in Karzai, they were able to sort of manage it more politically and diplomatically with the Pakistanis, right? I think, the Taliban has taken over since 21 and they've basically poured fuel on fire. They've refused to recognize the Durand line. And they've refused to stop or put any sort of stopgaps on organizations such as the TTP or the Tehreek-e-Taliban.
But why is that? I mean, the falling out between the TTP and the army is now, literally, I mean, it's become a major problem because I believe the army had a ceasefire where they would not attack the TTP and had given them time, and that was scrapped in 2022.
Yeah.
So the TTP's made a whole list of demands, right? It wants its people released from detention. It wants 7 border regions status restored. It wants the Pakistan army to exit the no-go areas. I mean, that is a really tall, call. I mean, why would the Pakistan army do that? So is there a falling out then between Pakistan and Afghanistan, I think, at this point. I mean, the Taliban-run government
Yeah.
and Pakistan.
Yeah.
And this reverse, I think, has also happened where, you know, you had Pakistan always looked at Afghanistan as a strategic depth.
Yeah.
You know, but it's almost like now Afghanistan is looking at Pakistan as its
Yeah.
strategic depth.
I think that's a
Or
very
maybe
good
I'm being
question.
foolish.
No, I think that
is
yeah.
it a reverse then of the
So,
strategic depth?
I was always very skeptical about this whole sort of design of what strategic depth means, right? Because from the perspective of the Taliban, I think that for a long period of time, of course, their patrons are in Pakistan. Everyone sort of understands and knows that. But you have to understand groups like TTP, fought with the Afghan Taliban for 20 years in the trenches.
Right, alongside, yes.
Alongside. Now, the Afghan Taliban, even though, when Imran Khan was there in 2021, he said, the Afghans have broken the shackles of slavery and now they're free, and the Taliban is sort of going to be a positive, I presume that was his intention, that a positive force in Kabul. I think they grossly misunderstood of what the Taliban ultimately intended to do, because they had no inclination of being a satellite state to the Pakistanis, because the Pakistanis are not very popular in the Afghan public.
That's right.
So they had to balance it out, and it was critical for them to be not seen as a satellite state to the Pakistani establishment, and specifically the deep state. And when it comes to groups like the TTP, they keep on saying that, look, they are in largely in Pakistani territories and not in Afghanistan, which is mostly not true.
Not true at all.
Yeah. So, but they are in no position to rein the TTP in, because for a long period of time, the TTP, Al Qaeda, and all these groups gave bench strength to the Taliban over the past 20 years. And now that they have, sort of what you say, I mean, quote unquote, being victorious over the past 2 years, all these groups now basically demand their own agency, because they said, look, we fought for you for 20 years. Now, what we fought for was not necessarily the ideation of an Afghan state, but we fought for the pan-Islamic view of how we see this part of the world. That means that we are against the government in Islamabad, and okay, we are against democracy, we are against plurilateralism, and so on and so forth. So from that point of view, the Afghan Taliban is not really in a position to tell the TTP what to do, because that risks a level of civil war within Afghanistan as well. And I don't think the Afghan Taliban is very prepared and is very sure whether they will weather a civil war internally or not. They see this as their final, maybe their final attempt in holding power in Afghanistan.
Right.
And if they fail now, they may never return, and something else may return. So as part of the Taliban movement that was started by Mullah Omar, they may not be able to sustain it if they are not able to consolidate their own political power first.
So that's why they're taking their hands off the TTP, that there is no confrontation with the TTP.
Absolutely.
But that leaves also, I believe that a lot of the leaders of the TTP itself live in Afghanistan. I've forgotten what his name is, Masood, yeah. He and his family. But what I'm more curious about is that, Noor Wali Masood.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about is that why is the Pakistan military unable to counter the TTP? What is it that they have failed to recognize? I mean, because these are, is it because the TTP has got, ground support from the Pashtun and the Balochi separatists, or are they, working in tandem? And apparently, they're also very well armed.
Yeah.
The group, the soldiers, I mean, not soldiers, the Mujahideen who fought with fought alongside the Taliban and now are based in Balochistan and KPK.
I think there's no easy answer to that, but from what I would think is, I think and there are a lot of hypotheses on this, but from what I think is the most probable one is it goes back to 2014 or even before that, when Operation Zarbizab happened. And and it targeted Pashtuns, right? It targeted Pashtuns in that part of the region. A lot of Pashtuns are pushed across the Durand line, and they got a lot of support and refuge by local Pashtun villages across the border. right? But they ultimately saw their displacement from places like Waziristan and so on and so forth, and KP and all, as an act of the Pakistani military and an act of the Pakistani government. So
Ah,
it goes back to that. So if you see the initial consolidation of ISKP, what was the ISKP? It formed out of TTP militants. When the TTP
ah,
militants went to the other side, and they were given refuge by local villages. Local villagers did not know them as TTP militants; they knew them as Pashtuns, right? So there
fellow
was
Pashtuns.
yeah, there was Pashtun solidarity, but they started using those villages as areas to incubate their own ideologies and so on and so forth. And that's how a lot of the ISKP started. The initial two leaders of ISKP was a Pashtun guy and an Uzbek guy, right? So it was very easy even for the Pakistani military at that point of time to break into ISKP as well. So they tried to sort of get the Pashtun part of ISKP on their side first, and sort of sow discord on that front, which didn't work out very well. So they've
Hmm.
been trying these amalgamation of strategies on trying to manage this situation, but no one wholesome strategy has been brought in. And I think they, trying this mixed match of military versus ethnic consolidation versus political Islam at a certain level is very unclear way of going about things. And we are seeing that now because none of it has worked. And right now they have no new ideations on what to do. And one of the reasons of that happening was we saw this very futile attempt at a peace deal between the TTP
And the
and the
army.
Pakistani state, and that comes from a fact. The Afghan Taliban said basically, look, we've tried it with the Americans; it worked for us. Maybe give it a shot. But the TTP's aim, if you see their propaganda material now and so on and so forth, it's completely different. It's the displacement of the Pakistani state. That's what they
Hmm.
aim for. They're not in it
Hmm.
for anything less. So, how do you sort of either you go, full gung ho against the Pashtuns within your state, which is basically starting a war amongst your own people, uh,
People.
or ask the Afghan Taliban to rein the TTP in. And the problem is for the Pakistanis, none of them is working for the time being.
But that's also very interesting that the main victims of these bombings are the, I mean, are the Pashtuns and the Balochis. I mean, they're not, maybe the Shia Hazaras are also being attacked. But it's Afghan nationals who are the majority of the, suicide bombers. I mean, they've given statistics. Sarfraz Bukti,
Yeah.
the caretaker interior minister, said 14 of the 24 attacks were by Afghans.
Yeah.
So it's the Afghans who are doing it also.
But the thing is that the Taliban, which is a new dispensation in Kabul, refutes that. They say they are not Afghan. They say the TTP resides and operates only in Pakistan. Right. Now,
Ah,
now that is their positioning. And that automatically is basically them stepping away from any idea that the TTP is actually hosted by the Afghans. Right. It says it's a Pakistani problem, and they say that it should have a Pakistani solution. It has nothing to do with us. Now, because the Pakistanis blamed the suicide bombers on Afghans, now they're telling 1.2 million refugees that they will be sent back to
yes,
Afghanistan.
that is the backlash. Yes.
And we saw Mullah Umar's son yesterday, who's the
Yeah.
interim defense minister, come out yesterday in public and say that this is a gross injustice, and the Taliban will act in accordance to what it feels is the correct way of protecting its own people. Now
So
you
what
can
do you
try.
see happening? I mean, this is a rift between the Afghan Taliban government and Pakistan that's hitherto never been seen.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
look,
it's
I'll tell you another problem is that the Afghan Taliban also has a problem of not having enough internal cohesion. Right, there are
mm,
divisions between the Haqqanis, which are still loyal to the Pakistani state, and the Kandaharis that are trying to sort of forge their own path separately
and
from
sort
from the
of
Pakistani state.
placate the
Exactly.
West.
But the problem, of course, there is, I think, and this is again my personal sort of reading of things, is that the Supreme Leader Habibullah Akhundzada
Mm.
has a strategy that in case there is internal collapse within Afghanistan and within the Taliban hierarchies, that the Kabul centric leadership sees the theological centric leadership of Kandahar as a hindrance, and tries to sort of undermine them. I think for the Kandaharis, the TTP is the new Haqqani. So in case there is a
Oh.
battle, I think the TTP will be required to protect the Kandahari clan because there is a level of refuge given to them. So there are multiple dynamics at play, and just Pakistan state against the TTP is just one of them right now. right? So there's ISKP, there is TTP, there is Haqqanis, there is internal cohesion. So it's a very, very
And the
messy
Uyghurs,
situation.
and the Uyghurs are also there.
And the Uyghurs, I mean, Uyghurs are still very limited in numbers.
Yeah.
They really don't pull or push any rank and so on and so forth. But again, all of these guys are still given refuge in Afghanistan because all of them at some level fought for the Taliban. In various shapes and form. And once you do that, right, and see it from the Taliban perspective, if you have won a war against the Americans,
Yeah.
but if you are then seen collaborating with the Americans, how do you sell it to your cadre, right? How do you sell that outreach to your cadre? It may be realist way of doing things as a state, but it will not sell to families who've lost people over generations fighting for the
That's
Taliban against the
true.
Americans. So it's a very complex, it's just, it goes much beyond Pakistan, but these are all in certain way designs of Pakistani thinking over the past many decades, which is
But you don't, but which has gone completely awry.
I think they completely misread what they were trying to do, and they completely misdesigned what they were trying to do. And for a long time, people have been saying that, but I think now that they have an example of it on their own borders, maybe it's a learning curve for them.
Yeah, and this Mastung, the bomb that went off, basically which was the Salafis against the hardline Salafis, basically attacking the Shias. But I mean, there are madrasas there which apparently have all been go back to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the Al Qaeda leader. So I was just wondering whether the whole issue would come to a sort of a confrontation in Mastung itself. Will the Pakistan army use that as an excuse and a ploy to go after these madrasas?
I mean, one would think that would have been the opportune thing to do, maybe. I mean, that's an opportunity that has presented itself where you can sort of, on the pretext of national security, walk in and dismantle a lot of these ecosystems. But I'm presuming from the Pakistani calculations, it is also that, okay, if we actually go in and start to dismantle this, are we ultimately inviting a more direct challenge to our authority in Islamabad and Kabul, in Savada and Rawalpindi? And how is that going to affect the Punjabi part of Pakistan? Because right now the Punjab part of Pakistan is largely centralized against a thinking against India and Kashmir, right? So if they have to start diluting that to protect the other part of Pakistan, what happens to this entire ecosystem they've built over the past 70 years?
So they have a twin challenge basically, because they have to tackle India and they have to tackle India and Afghanistan at the same time.
And the only problem is I don't think they expected Afghanistan to be this bigger problem. I think their calculations are quite different to what is happening right now.
What is this? How do you see the attacks in Karachi? It's almost as if the army is doing another cleanup there. I mean, they're going after the Lashkar-e-Jangvi, they're going after the Lashkar-e-Taiba. I mean, and it's like targeted killings. I mean, the Maulvis are being targeted. The deputy to the LET chief.
I think, there are a couple of things here. The first is, of course, Pakistan will not be very receptive to any such group who are not conformists. Yeah, if they're not conforming to the Pakistani agendas and states, then they will attract the ire of Pakistan itself. But also, on the other hand, this is a very good example that, every group that tactically is with you or tactically works for your strategy is not necessarily strategically good for you in the long term. Ideologically and theologically, most of these groups have their own thinking. And if that thinking is not aligning beyond a point with any state, whether it's the Taliban or whether it's the Pakistani side, that they will turn on them. So we have seen, for example, former Lashkar-e-Taiba, Lashkar-e-Jhanvi, and all these people joining the ISKP. Because, ideologically, it's much more inclined with what they were trying to do over the past many years than, let's say, the real politic of Lashkar-e-Taiba as an extension of the Pakistani state and so on and so forth.
Do you think the Pakistan army has taken its eye off the ball for a bit? Because, I mean, they were focused so much on putting Imran Khan back into a box and getting their own political, proteges up there. I mean, they still haven't succeeded. Do you think that they got distracted by that?
I think Imran Khan's popularity distracted them significantly. I think maybe that was something they were not expecting. They were not expecting that kind of, I mean, even I can't remember the last time a Pakistani leader had that kind of public pull, right?
I think Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was the only one.
But that's a
Yeah.
big gap between Zulfikar
Yeah.
and what Imran Khan was. So I think they got extremely worried about real possibilities of Imran Khan succeeding in displacing certain people in the Pakistani army. And they got very busy with consolidating their own positions. That's so that they don't have to escape, they don't have to run away somewhere, and their political positions are safe. And amongst, within that sort of fist fighting that was happening, I think a lot of these new challenges were brewing, which and they kept their eyes off it for a long period of time. And now it's
And
yeah.
it's obviously a bogey that they're not going to be able to tackle anytime soon. But what
Yeah.
is it also? I mean, if you set in the context of the US and China, for instance. I mean, Pakistan is a country, Afghanistan is a country that they both need. So in many ways, I mean, we have the Afghans and the Pakistan army
Yeah.
opening their doors to the US to a
Mm.
great extent. I mean, you had the US envoy going to Gilgit-Baltistan and
Yeah.
Gwadar. And then there were reports of a very ugly sort of spat between the Chinese and the
Yeah.
Pakistanis over CPEC.
Yeah.
So do you feel that it's also a proxy sort of, push and pull by the Chinese and the US?
I genuinely don't. I think if you talk to a lot of Americans on this, they were at least till very recently fairly disinterested in Pakistan. They have very limited aims such as security of the nuclear arsenal and so on and so forth. But what is happening now is, once again, in my opinion, look, the Chinese are not taking it very well that their investments are not first getting enough returns, and second, there is a security deterioration to the point they're losing their own people in some of their
That's
attacks.
right. In Quetta,
In
they're
Quetta,
being
right?
targeted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's something Beijing does not take very kindly, right? And the second thing is, Pakistan is back to that state with the US where it is able to force a conversation with the US while having once again a gun to its own head. Right, because I mean, I think the Secretary of Defense of the US and Asif Mudi just had a conversation on Tuesday. And that was after a long time because the Americans were really, really not interested in dealing with Pakistan's issues once again. But now the Pakistan is going to DC and saying, look, the TTP is a huge thing. ISKP is increasing. We are in trouble. And if we don't cooperate
Step
once
in and
again on
help.
this, if we don't cooperate once again on this, it is going to brew into something very ugly for you also, possibly in the
So
future.
that's why I asked whether the targeted killings,
Yeah.
I mean, at the Mastung bomb blast,
Yeah.
the TTP has said that they are not taking responsibility for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
ISIS Khorasan has not said a word.
Yeah.
So do you think that the Pakistan army could be using this whole as a ploy to get the US to back them again?
Possibly, definitely, especially financially, right? Because they are in dire straits. They want some sort of they would really like return of the military packages that they used to get from the US. Whether that actually
Which Trump went and cancelled, scrapped.
Yeah, and they would really like that to be restarted now. And this is the best time, right? You tell them that, look, the TTP is here, ISKP is here, ISPP is here, which is the Pakistan province. All of these guys are really, I mean, if you hear Tom West's speech at Stimson Center a couple of days ago, he said that TTP is the biggest regional challenge. Suddenly now the TTP is in the conscience of the US narrative.
Become a household word.
Exactly. And that basically
US.
shows that the Pakistani push is sort of working once again in DC when it comes to counterterrorism and so on and so forth.
So they're using the TTP then to, sort of win the US back to their side.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, back to the Stephen Cohen quote, right? They always negotiate with the gun to their own head. So they're doing it once again. Yeah.
That's really brilliant. That's really brilliant. But if I can just go back to India, I mean, we've looked at Pakistan through as you said, through the eyes of Kashmir. We've never looked, and the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Taiba have operated from Kashmir.
Yeah.
Is that a concern then for us? Because I mean, if the Tehrik-e-Taliban or whoever it is that is getting credence and popularity in these areas, could there be a spillover, to our borders? I mean, as you say, the shadow. Is there a shadow then over India, or is that too far-fetched? Guys, I've lost him again. I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit too far for the moment. But if you see the propaganda that these guys release, right, both ISKP and TTP and so on and so forth, idea-wise, they have no intention of stopping at Pakistan. Right. Their intention is much greater of building this sort of caliphate kind of infrastructure, which stretches
Yeah.
from Kandahar to Dhaka, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to also remember, as far as Sharia goes, in their interpretation of Sharia, all the things that India stands for, whether it's democracy, whether it's plurilateralism, and so on and so forth, secularism, and so on and so forth, it's something that they despise. I mean, even if you see the latest propaganda released by ISKP called Voice of Khorasan, they have a full chapter, a 6-page chapter on what they think is the new world order, right? So they ideologically, at least, they are very they're very much interested in taking this much beyond the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we should not take that lightly, because indoctrination is a very powerful thing. If let's say which is what I also say, this not, I know there's a level of celebrationness in India, with the fact that Pakistan is really struggling on that front. But beyond a point, if the security threat arrives in this part of the world as well, it's going to be a big problem for us as well.
We don't want another 2611.
Exactly.
So my last question to you basically is about, whose narrative will the US buy? Will it be the Afghans, Taliban narrative, which basically says, we'll live in peace, we'll keep your troops here, whatever little presence you want? Or will it be the Pakistan's bogey of the TTP? What do you think is going to sell in Washington?
Look, I think what is selling already in Washington is that they do believe that the Taliban, largely for their own security, which is Taliban security, they are going very hard after the ISKP. So on the ISKP front, they are fairly certain that what they are talking with the Taliban about will be achieved at some level, that the Taliban, because ISKP is inherently against the Taliban rule, so they will by nature go after them, right? So that sort of works for everyone in the region as well, because ISKP is sort of against most of the countries in the region. Now, the thing with the TTP is that I think the US will have to sort of work closely with Pakistan, because the Taliban will not give the TTP up, right? They are not going to, they will maintain it's not an Afghanistan thing, it's a Pakistani thing. And ultimately, it will be something that the Americans, when as far as the discussion of the threat is concerned, they will have to raise it with the Pakistanis, because ultimately it will have to come in some sort of ceasefire, for the lack of a better term, between the Pakistani and the Taliban. There's no other way out of it, right?
But why do the Balochis support the TTP, or do they not?
Okay, I'm not very familiar with what kind of support the Balochis are sort of espousing towards the TTP, but you have to also remember TTP is not a rational actor. So even if they're doing that, it's out of political compulsions of the day. So what they think will work for them today. But as we have seen many times in the past, these sort of short-term thinking, short-term alliances for short-term gains have very bad long-term consequences, even for sort of movements such as the Baloch movement and so on and so forth. So I think even from their perspective, they'll be very careful of ultimately long-term wise, even what does the TTP think about us more than anything else.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Kabir. So it was reportedly one of the bloodiest days in Pakistan's recent history. You yourself, your Center for Research and Security Studies, as well as other groups, the Pakistan Institute of Peace Studies, have all said that there's been a 57% escalation in militant violence in the last few months. One says there was 79% in the first 6 months of 2023 alone. So what is behind this, the militants getting more audacious? They seem to be better armed because they obviously have access to the equipment left behind by the Americans. They seem far better organized. Who are these terror groups? The so-called new terror triad is what they're calling it. They're saying it, the Tehrik-e-Taliban in Pakistan, the Islamic State Khorasan, and the Balochistan Liberation Army. So, Mr. Gul, would you like to take us through this? Who are these, and why is Pakistan army not able to curb it?
There are too many questions to answer, but I'll try to dissect them one by one. And in the first place, thank you very much for having me on your show. Now, what is the triad? The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the ISKP or Daesh, and the Baloch Liberation Front. They are basically, in my view, proxy terrorists. Terrorist groups,
Yeah.
which have one objective, and that objective is to deliver pricks to Pakistan, to systematically inflict pain on Pakistan, project it as an unsafe country, unstable country. And the only method that we can discern in the madness that we see around us from the northwest to the southwest, along the 2,600 kilometer long border with Afghanistan, is this commonality of interest, and that interest is the proxy nature. They are basically different names of the same.
Are you saying, Mr. Gul, that they're a proxy for the Taliban government which is sitting in Kandahar, and which no longer sees eye to eye with Pakistan? Who are they a proxy for?
So before the Taliban returned to power, probably there was a connection between the National Directorate of Security, that was the Afghan intelligence, and the TTP, evident from the fact that back in 2013, one of the lieutenants of the then TTP chief, Hakimullah Masood, was basically snatched by the American Marines from the NDS forces and then handed over to Pakistan. So that was Latifullah Masood. And this happened around November 2013. So that was a first major glimpse of what the TTP was up to. So in those days, the connection could be then basically established between the NDS under President Ashraf Ghani and the TTP.
Yeah, because, now we have to because the President Ashraf Ghani had been making charges that there were safe havens for the the Taliban in Pakistan. That was his charge, right? And so Pakistan said that was defended that quite strongly, saying there was no such safe haven.
Yeah, of course, Pakistan defended or denied it, whereas the reality was to the contrary. But now we have to also make a distinction if we are getting into an academic discussion. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is a designated terrorist organization, globally designated terrorist organization by the United Nations as well as by the United States, whereas Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan, which currently rules Afghanistan, they were never outlawed. Its leaders were, because of their connections with Al-Qaeda, but the organization as such was never outlawed. And
that is a very interesting point.
Differences. So there's multiple differences, and there's always this tendency to equate the TTP with the Afghan Taliban. But
that's right.
Pakistan never really wanted a deal with the TTP. They entered into talks, but then the TTP, which basically was born in December 2007. So this is what this was also your original question, that this group basically emerged in 2007, 13th of December, and the agenda was at that time, to target all those people who are aligning themselves with the United States and all those who are partner in the coalition against terrorism. So this was the common objective, and they at that time said that because Pakistan was partnering with the United States in the war against terrorism, that's why Pakistan, the state of Pakistan, the army remains a legitimate target. So this is
post the Mr. Ashraf Ghani's government going and the Taliban taking over, under Habibullah Akhundzada, there does seem to be a hands-off approach by the Taliban on the TTP. They basically said that that we've got nothing to do with them. But I mean, clearly they do, because the Masood has taken refuge in Afghanistan, the leadership of the TTP, and so that there must be some kind of linkage between the two. But there is a hands-off approach by the Taliban on the TTP, which gives them the ability to, to operate the way they do. I mean, the toll that is being taken by the Pakistan army is not small.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a very interesting transition in the Taliban's position on the TTP. So we are talking about the Afghan Taliban. So ever since their return to Kabul as the victor in August 2021, they have been for quite some time denying the presence of the TTP in Afghanistan. They would always counter Pakistani requests with a counter request that, well, if you have any evidence on the presence of the TTP in Afghanistan, share this with us and we will go after them. But eventually they didn't do anything. Now, in the last couple of months, they have conceded the presence in a way that they said, okay, we will take now actions. They have been now, they issued a couple of decrees asking their own people not to join TTP. They also agreed to, on their own, relocate TTP residences and shelters from the border areas from the border areas, basically somewhere into admission of the presence. Now, they were promising a lot. Publicly, they could not go after the TTP because they have been comrades in arms. They have been partners in the war against, during the war against terrorism led by the United States. So they were all together in that fight. And that's why the Afghan Taliban are very, very reluctant in being seen as having betrayed their former comrades. And this also, we also have to understand, what should be good, maybe useful for your viewers. So we have to look at it from the tribal context, tribal mindset, that in the Afghanistan remains a primarily tribal society. And in tribal society, if you turn your back on your former friend, this is seen as betrayal, as treachery. So the rank and file can get upset if the top leadership says, we will now go after this. This is what Pakistan also faced. When Pakistan, for instance, started going after terrorists in the border areas in 2007, 8, 9. So a lot of people would tell us when we visited those areas, at times no-go areas, they would say, this is strange. Until yesterday, the army was telling us that they are mujahideen, they are our partners. And now they're telling us they are terrorists and don't shelter them. So this has happened and is happening in Afghanistan, that the Afghan Taliban don't want to be seen as having betrayed the TTP, those people who were together with them. Secondly, Nur Wali Masood, the chief of the TTP, is practically living as a state guest in Afghanistan, in Kabul itself.
Exactly.
So, and he met with Pakistani delegations in July last year in the presence of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the current interior minister of the Afghan Taliban. So there was a delegation, religious clerics delegation, whom Nur Wali Masood and Sirajuddin Haqqani met together. There was another official delegation, Pakistani military delegation, and Nur Wali Masood met them in Kabul. He lives there with many other extended families. Right now, the quandary for the Afghan Taliban is as to how to go after them. And now, because Pakistan is Pakistan's patience, the TTP has worn thin.
That's very well put, actually. Pakistan's patience is wearing thin.
Just because of this continued surge, very continuous surge, has already worn thin, and that's why Pakistan is now, I think, putting its foot down in various ways, and it has conveyed to
but
the
do you
Kabul
think
administration very categorically that they want
that they want the refugees also to be returned to Afghanistan? I mean, you have hundreds of refugees who are. Also, would that also create a kind of a sort of schism between the Kandahari Taliban and the Pakistan government?
Look, I mean, this is a very intricate issue. I don't think any government can really throw out refugees or foreigners, but we have to also draw a line. We have to be very clear. Pakistan government has very clearly said they will send back all those people who are not documented and living here.
Oh, I see.
People without documents, without any visas. Because
Has
there are
that got anything to do,
million...
Mr. Gul? Has that got anything to do with the fact that the number of suicide bombers, they say that 14 out of the 27 suicide bombers were Afghan nationals?
I mean, this is one reason. This is one of the driving factors. But the reality remains that even if they were Afghans, they were part of the TTP. They were fighting under the flag of the TTP, which means there are Afghans willing to join outside Afghanistan. And we also have to be issued a decree asking all their ranks and cadres not to join any foreign organization for operations outside the territory of Afghanistan. So in a way that don't use Afghan soil for terrorist activities in Pakistan, Iran, or elsewhere. And secondly, the Interior Minister, the Defense Minister, as well as the Law Minister to Kandahar and Kabul, they were visiting provinces one by one to convey to their cadres just to stay away from TTP or any other organization because they don't want to spoil their relations with the neighbors. Their spokesperson, Zabiullah Mujahid, told me the same, that we don't want any harm to our neighboring country. So this is their publicly stated position. However, there's limitation to this position in two ways. One is the operational capacity of the Taliban. They could be controlling everything, every nook and corner of the country in a tribal society. Tribal society offers a lot of refuge to criminals, to murderers. So, even murderers can get away with murders by asking for refuge with a tribal family. So we have to keep that in mind. And the second limitation is again tribal, that the Taliban basically are very, very reluctant in being seen as having been treacherous with their former comrades. So we have to underline this time and again. Now, having said that, there is a big quandary for Pakistan. Yes. Every day, almost on a daily basis, Pakistan is losing soldiers in the border area. Yesterday, we lost 2. Last night, 1 or 2 were lost in the border areas. And there can't be any justification for the TTP to operate in a situation where they are issuing decrees with the signatures of Nur Wali Masood, who is sheltering in Kabul. So that's why Pakistan basically tightened the squeeze, telling them that, I have to do something. And thirdly, because the TTP has owed allegiance to Hibatullah Akhundzada, the Amir of Taliban. Now, a lot of Pakistani officials, and we also as analysts, as commentators, ask a very fundamental question. What happens if any Afghan or any outsider who has owed allegiance to Hibatullah Akhundzada goes against his orders, violates his orders? So we haven't got any plausible answer, but our foreign minister, Jalil Jilani, met with Amir Muttaqi, I think in Tibet, a few days ago.
At the Trans-Himalayan
And the Amir Muttaqi, the Afghan foreign minister, promised tangible acts. And Pakistan has been, I think, very categorical that this cloak and dagger policy cannot continue anymore. So if you
It's just
want to
it's a
be also in the
double game.
Sorry, I lost you.
I said it's very deceptive, and it's almost like a double game, saying one thing through the decree, while on the ground, giving them shelter and allowing them the use of all these very sophisticated armory.
Yeah, I mean, that is precisely the position that Pakistan has taken, but Pakistan is not alone in this. It's China, it's Russia, it's the Central Asian republics, it's Iran. Every country is saying you cannot deploy this duplicity. I mean, if you are well-meaning, we take you on your face value that you don't want any harm to us through any proxy terrorist group, then might as well you have to double down on them, even if impacts your public image. But they are also being told that if you want to be recognized or if you want to be seen as a responsible state, because the Afghan Taliban are not a militia anymore.
They are not.
They are ruling a state which is still a member of the United Nations. So they are being told very politely, diplomatically, that everybody respects you because you have fought for 20 years. Now that respect can double up if you also take actions against people who are a source of concern for all the neighboring countries. And this is what
do you
gets
think
them.
would you place any blame at Imran Khan's door? Because I mean, it was his amnesty which allowed these thousands of TTP fighters to come into Pakistan. I mean, it was almost like a deluge, right? And do you also see the TTP as more dangerous than the Lashkar-e-Jangvi or the Lashkar-e-Taiba or and the Taliban itself? Because it seems to be running, beating its own, running to its own, to its own rules. It doesn't really give a toss for anyone else at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there are three different questions, actually. First, let me clarify. Everybody who knows Pakistan, everybody who knows how Pakistan works, Afghanistan has never been in the civilian domain. So because of vested interest, because of selfish motives of Imran Khan's critics and of his political opponents, they managed to create a narrative which basically said Imran Khan provided a peace deal to the TTP, and that's how they came in to Pakistan.
So it wasn't really him.
So let me explain this. Imran Khan was gone on the 9th of April. The meetings, critical meetings with the TTP leadership in Kabul took place in June, involving military and civilian leadership. There was no undertaking, and those talks practically broke down. Why? Because Pakistan was telling them, you have to disarm, lay down your arms, you have to surrender to the Constitution of Pakistan, you have to disband the TTP, and there will be no pardon, there will be formal trial of all those people who are considered as black, as people who are facing serious criminal charges. So these were the four demands that Pakistan placed on the table. The counter demands from TTP was restore the federally administered tribal areas as they existed in
the no-go areas.
These are the border areas with Afghanistan. This is called FATA. They said, remove the army from those areas. They say, not disband the TTP as a militant organization. Number 4, they said, we will tell you where to locate your security checkposts, your formation checkposts along the border. So in these 4 demands from each side, obviously for any country which possesses nuclear weapons, which owns the 6th or 7th largest army, such a country, for that matter, for any country, these conditions are totally non-negotiable.
And yet there was a ceasefire. Why did that ceasefire go into place?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. So the talks broke down in the presence of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the Interior Minister of Afghanistan's Taliban. And within few days, the people in Swat, up in the north, they saw all these people coming in hordes. So how can you lay the blame at the doorstep of Imran Khan? Imran Khan was long gone for almost 3 months. So it was extremely selfish on the part of whoever created the narrative, just because they wanted to get rid of Imran Khan, and they also wanted to malign him, whereas his government had nothing to do with us.
With the return of the TTP.
Yeah. And also civilian governments, wouldn't actually dare get into such deals anyway, just because it's a very intricate matter. It deals with the security along the borders. So it's not entirely in the capacity of the.
But why did the army then have a kind of a hands-off approach, allow the ceasefire, and that allowed them to integrate back into the community and build those, the tribal, as you said, the tribal relationships go back.
No, they were when they came with the arms. Their condition, the verbal promise was that they will come without any arms, that they would not try to impose their way of life on the locals. But they came with the arms. They tried to enforce their so-called Sharia on people in the greater Swat region. So this is what caused the alarm. And then a lot of politicians, civil society activists, they took to the streets through demonstrations. So within 4 or 5 weeks, all these people were then made to basically go back. So the ceasefire, yes, there was a sort of ceasefire, which again, the Taliban unilaterally revoked on the 29th of November last year, because they saw that they cannot achieve anything, because they realized that the Pakistan government will not accept these unacceptable demands. These are the deadlines. So that's why I'm saying these are proxy terrorist groups which have placed unacceptable demands for any sovereign state, and they have the only agenda, whether it's of BLF or ISKP or TTP, is to destabilize Pakistan.
So why is it that the TTP seems to be so much attacking Mustang? I mean, all the various attacks have been in that region, and plus also aimed at the Jamiat Ulema Islam Fazlur Rahman's group. I mean, he's also faced the brunt of it. Why is that so? I mean, the army is one, the security agencies are one, and then the political groups, and then these congregations, which are obviously the Shia Hazara communities.
Well,
so are
these
they
are all
seeking to take over?
These are all very serious political fault lines in Pakistan. Shia, like the sectarian violence against other religious minorities, violence against sub-nationalist groups. So if you look at the pattern, it hardly differs from what we see in northwestern frontier province, which is the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or what we see in Balochistan. The tactics are the same.
But were there such violence? Was there such violence in the past?
I mean, we have seen much worse, actually, in the years 2009, 8, 10, 11. So the pattern is very clear. It's like about delivering bricks to the fault lines. And the fault line is the security, the religious minorities, ethnic minorities, and they're just targeting these minorities, creating this semblance of the persecution of religious minorities. So whether it's Baloch, and also why I'm saying these are proxy terrorists operating in unison, the Baloch are traditionally secular people. They are not religious at all. I know them. I have a lot of friends that's
right.
TTP is using the Khilafat, Islamic Khilafat jargon to legitimize its violence. ISKP is using the same jargon of Khilafat. They don't believe in borders, whereas TTP believes in borders. That's why it wants a Khilafat for itself in the former Fatah areas. So it is just
so it basically wants a breakaway. It basically wants to break away a big chunk of Pakistan and create its own state. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. This is what they want, and that's why the talks also broke down, because Pakistan basically abolished the special status of federally administered tribal areas back in May 2018. That is history. So you cannot, a small disparate group of terrorists cannot basically force a state to reverse what it did 5 years ago.
So is the Pakistan army actually also paying a price? I mean, it did actually set up, it did actually give credence to a lot of groups, the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed and all these people who operated out of Kashmir and, in across the borders and basically, pinpricks at India with the 26/11, the Bombay bomb blasts and so on. So do you think it's come back to bite them in the sense they also took their eye off the ball for a bit, because I mean they were so consumed with the fact that Imran Khan was such a threat to their hold on the country that the TTP has just come from nowhere and created this sort of unrest in Balochistan and KPK.
Well, let's not create an analogy between Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed and the TTP. The Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed or all these Kashmir-focused organizations, they never carried out any attacks inside Pakistan. They
didn't.
had the support for them was for Kashmir, right?
Yeah.
They never attacked. Yeah. They never looked inwards. Whereas TTP or ISKP, they are very clearly, systematically targeting the interests of the state of Pakistan. And we have to look at it in the broader context. The broader context is the China-US conflict. And basically,
in fact, I did want to look at that also, because I mean the fact that the Chinese engineers have been targeted in Quetta, very singled out and killed, is interesting, because I mean the conspiracy theories are many, saying that who's behind the targeting of this and why should the Chinese be targeted, and also the rising interest of the US in sort of bringing Pakistan back into some kind of role, as an ally. They want the Chinese out, and they want Pakistan back in their sort of pocket. So do you agree with that? I mean, is that?
I mean, this is what has happened in the last year and a half. Imran Khan had been very vocal about relations with China, and he on a number of occasions made it clear that Pakistan's economic future is tied to China, and this is what upset a lot of people. He was, I think, a little reckless, not very guarded in the choice of words, and this is what alarmed both the military.
I think that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, so he basically his words alarmed not only the military establishment in Pakistan, but also raised alarm in Washington. And for your viewers, the Americans as well as your own country have been very vocal in the opposition to the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And,
that's right.
And then the United States created a China Mission Center in October 2021 with a specific objective of countering China's expanding influence. So you can Google that, China Mission Center, October 2021. So John Burns, I think, was the CIA director at that time, and he also gave a press conference about that. So my question is, as an academic, if India and the United States are cooperating very closely, and their objective is to counter what President Biden also said, the ascendant challenge from China, then how would you be deploying? How would the CIA be deploying the China Mission Center in containing the growing influence of China? So the thought I will leave with you.
It's a very interesting point. Very interesting point. There is also another charge which is being made against Pakistan by a couple of columnists who've said that Pakistan could use this reign of terror to their advantage, this whole Tehreek-e-Taliban narrative, to bring itself back into the reckoning as far as Washington is concerned. I mean, it did lose $32 billion in aid, military aid, when Trump, crashed and burned the Pakistan-US relationship. So do you think that could also be a part of the army's thinking? Because I mean, this is the way the army has made itself indispensable to the West in the past.
I mean, this would amount to bankruptcy if anybody thought that they could woo the United States back into Pakistan, into Afghanistan by just ratcheting up controlled violence.
Not that they ratcheted it up, but the Tehrik-e-Taliban has risen from wherever they've come from, and they do threaten Pakistan's security to a great extent. That is a reality.
No, but the reality is that it's not the making of the Pakistan army. The army itself suffered a lot. It's still suffering, as I said.
No, that I agree.
They are losing people every day. So
that's right.
There are people who are suggesting that the Pakistan army may itself be doing something, maybe staging these things to convince the Americans to come back. I just came from a seminar where American, Russian, Chinese were also present. And why I was telling you about the Sino-US conflict absorbing Pakistan as the Chinese scholar who was there, it was quite astounding. He said that Afghanistan is a good friend, but our relationship with Pakistan is far beyond friendship. Pakistan is much more important to us than any other country. So this statement in a packed hall, in a public meeting, does consider Pakistan as the closest ally.
Sorry, I lost you. Guys, it's frozen.
What China Mission Center actually means and which people it wanted to employ.
So where does that leave the relationship with the US then? Because I mean, that's also, you had the US envoy going to Gilgit-Baltistan, he went to Gwadar. I mean, I know they make these visits regularly, but this was at this juncture. It's very interesting that they should make that kind of a visit.
No, it's just a follow-up of getting rid of Imran Khan. Just because, the operation, the so-called, in the words of PTI, the operation regime change, it happened in April last year. And thereafter, gradually, the American diplomats also picked up courage to move out of their silos, go out in different parts of the country. And now that they realize that probably the military, Pakistan military, as well as the government, the caretaker government, are very much on its side. And they have conveyed to the United States, apparently, this is what the American scholars also say, that we do not want to be fully in bed with China. So that's why probably this is what has given confidence to the US diplomats, and that's why the American Ambassador Donald Blum has been visiting Northwest, Southwest, so very freely conveying messages of partnership. But if we look at the mood in Washington itself, there is no real sharp focus on Pakistan anymore. Biden administration is under clouds. They are heading into the next elections. So the only connector between Pakistan and the United States is the Ukraine conflict, where Pakistan clearly sided with the United States. And there were a lot of reports also in The Intercept that Pakistan has been providing some ammunition.
That's right.
Ukraine. So this is the only connector right now. And we wonder, what would happen if the war in Ukraine were to end tomorrow, whether the warmth that we see currently coming from the US side, whether it will sustain beyond the Ukraine.
Very interesting point, actually. I just wanted to also just to reaffirm the fact is that the Tehreek-e-Taliban is a threat to Pakistan security. There is a growing interest in Washington to to continue. I mean, sort of build a relationship. I think with Pakistan. China, of course, is the iron brother. What does that leave if the army is able to contain the violence and elections do happen in January 2024? Do you think that the civilian government will be able to call the shots literally vis-a-vis the Tehreek-e-Taliban, and attacking keeping this terrorism under the lid? I mean, is that going to happen, or no? A soundless no.
No, because had the TTP been an organic, ideologically driven organization, then one would have thought, okay, they could perhaps be amenable at some stage to lay down their arms, become part of the mainstream in order to push their agenda. But once it became clear in November last year, as well as in June last year, they wanted Pakistan essentially to surrender before them. They refused to lay down their arms. They refused to surrender before the Constitution of Pakistan. They refused to dismantle the organization. And they said, we will determine where the Pakistan army would have its security checkposts. So that basically drew a line between the readiness to talk to a group that may be disgruntled and a proxy terrorist organization that has put on table conditions which are not acceptable to any country. So that's why I keep repeatedly saying, regardless what sort of government comes into power as a result of election, which will be also a big question of credibility because of the way the former prime minister is being treated right now and the way his party has been practically demobilized. So there will be a huge question mark on the integrity of the electoral contest. But regardless of that, whatever government comes, no government, no amount of military offensives or operations would be able to totally neutralize, 100% neutralize the TTP or any other terrorist threat if that threat originates from proxy considerations.
One last question. Do you see a problem between Afghanistan and Pakistan breaking into a real offensive? I mean, in the sense, could there be a war almost?
I don't think the Afghans would want any war with their next door neighbor on which a lot of their survival hinges.
Yeah, they're landlocked.
So their current reactions are very much medieval. Pashtuns, Afghans are very emotional people, conservative, emotional, whimsical at times, who have a big sense of entitlement on their friends, on their neighbors. They also suffer from a big sense of victimhood as a result of over 4 decades of conflict in their country. And they believe that a lot of it has to do also with Pakistan. Pakistan has done a lot of confidence building measures for Afghans. It has given a lot of concessions to their trade, to the refugees. And still, a lot of Afghans are now projecting the current situation in extremely negative light. Pakistan very clearly said, we will deport all undocumented people living in Pakistan. And
but that's not what's believed.
Yeah. So and these guys gave it a twist as if all refugees are being told no. Even the reaction of the United Nations has been very muted to Pakistan's measures. Why? Pakistan is taking measures according to the rule of law to enforce rule of law. I mean, what did India do when the Taliban came to power? They revoked diplomatic passports of all Afghans. They revoked stay permits of all students. And I keep telling our American friends, European friends, that why are you so incensed about the Pakistani measures, which basically are aimed to regulate the flow of traffic on the border? You do the same to foreign immigrants in your own countries to enforce the law. So Pakistan is enforcing law, but you are telling Pakistan, let these people illegal entrance into the country, or people who have been overstaying, let them live here. So this is where all these countries have to draw a line as to what do they want. They can't be applying this rule of law yardstick selectively on a country like Pakistan. They stick to it themselves. They enforce it. My wife was denied, for instance, Sweden's visa. Why? Just because she had, in their paper, she had overstayed by 10 hours. There was some scheduling problem, so we got late. We had to reschedule. And the European Union visa, the Schengen visa, was denied to her through the Swedish embassy because hardly it was a matter of 8 to 10 hours. Whereas they expect Pakistan to allow people to live here even if they don't have visas.
Yeah.
I think we should end this conversation here.
Yeah, but thank you very much for being a part of it. And I really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you very much. Viewers, please do watch the Global Express and click on the New Indian Express to watch these programs. Thank you very much.